think we really are all asleep. What we're seeing here is a defining moment for the human race. You know, just today I read a report, a little teeny report in the newspaper. It was the most significant piece of information, sober information the human race has ever had. It was this big. And what the report said is that the Arctic is going to have open waters in 20 years in the summer. We need to understand what that means. There's never been open waters there in 3 million years. We are seeing a cataclysmic shift in the climate of this planet in real time right now. And if our scientists are right, we may see within 30, 40 years, maybe a century at the most, the potential demise of our species. We're really asleep all across the world.
And this graph shows how much the volume of the Arctic sea ice has fallen, more than 60% in the last 30 years, dropping to its lowest point this year.
The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. In 1963, when Vail first opened the ski area, it was $5 for an all-day lift ticket. Well, it doubles every 10 years. 1973 it was $10, 1983 it was $20, 1993 it was $40, 2003 it was $80, and if this keeps up by 2013 it'll be $160 a day to ski.
They want to talk about Al Bartlett's personality as opposed to the simple arithmetic he presented, which they still refuse to see.
Evidence that abrupt climate change is underway is provided by NASA recently, whereas it took the first 265 years of the Industrial Revolution. The first 265 years, from 1750 to September of 2015, during the 265 years, the global average temperature rose 1 degree Celsius. And in the next 4 months, it increased an additional 0.57 degrees Celsius. Woo! This is what the exponential function looks like.
We continue to underestimate the speed of climate change because we continued in our hubris not to understand the subtle feedback loops that trigger the next stage. It's moving so much faster than we thought, because in 2001 we thought the glaciers were going to melt on our great mountain ranges maybe in the 22nd century. The fourth report in 2007 says they're melting in real time. The Arctic may begin to see open waters sometime in the mid-22nd century. The fourth report and the new report this week, open waters clear in the summer 20 years from now, after millions of years. So this is moving much quicker because of all the feedback loops.
The biggest change that people are ignoring is that Arctic polar ice will go in September in the next 5 to 10 years. There's no question. The politicians say, no, it's 50 years away, but it's not. It's getting thinner and thinner.
That spent CO2 is entropy, and the methane and the nitrous oxide. It is much worse than the public is being told. Much worse.
It's the thickest and oldest ice in the Arctic. Scientists thought it would be the last to withstand the effects of a hotter planet, but it's starting to break apart. Twice this year, the waters around North Greenland have opened up, waters that are normally frozen, even in summer.
The effects of our emissions today are not actually realised in terms of the temperature for 30 to 40 years, so there's this time lag in the system. We're not so well equipped with dealing rationally with very long-term problems like climate change. So we have to act now to stop something happening in the future. If we wait until the full temperature effects are already upon us, then it's far too late to stop.
Siberia is all covered with frost. Under the frost is a time bomb. It's all the carbon deposits from the pre-ice age, because that was a teeming grassland full of animal and plant life. And when the climate tips, it tips very quickly in a few years. It tipped way back when, and all that carbon was captured under the ice. The ice is melting across Siberia. Carbon is coming up as CO2, and on the lake beds it's coming up methane, which is 23 times more potent. And there's more carbon underneath there than all the tropical rainforest. It's all going up into the atmosphere. It is a ticking time bomb.
Methane could be coming out of the permafrost in Siberia, and it's that extra input of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere which then leads us up to worst case scenarios to 6 or more degrees and the eventual wipeout of most of life on Earth.
And the journal Nature this year said it's accelerating 6 times faster than we thought 12 months ago. That's just one feedback loop.
What's causing this is a variety of different types of feedback. Now, for example, when there is a lot of snow and ice, what happens is sunlight reflects back into the atmosphere. But as ice and snow begin to melt, we see the water increasing in temperature because it's absorbing more sunlight. And what this does is it causes temperatures to get closer between the Arctic and the equator. As a result, wind and storm patterns change, as can the direction of sea currents, which only works to pull warmer water and air into the Arctic. And this further heats up temperatures.
We've found something extraordinary. Extraordinary and disturbing, that is. You recall what you said about how polar melting might disrupt the North Atlantic current?
Yes.
Well, I think it's happening.
But even if we go to Copenhagen and try to get it to 450 parts per million, the EU says that would maybe keep us at 2 degrees. Devastating, but we may survive. Then James Hansen comes along. His team goes under the oceans, and they looked at the core samples in the geological record, and he said to Brussels, you got it wrong. Because if you try to get the world to mitigate to 450 parts carbon per million, which no one wants to do, you go up 6 degrees Celsius in this century. And this is a quote: the end of human civilization as we've come to know it.
Biblical.
That's the chief climatologist for the United States government. I hope he's wrong. My suspicion is the scientists not only are not wrong, they keep underestimating the speed of this.
The scientists who write for the Arctic News blog warn humans could become extinct by the year 2026 if climate initiatives are ignored across the globe.
Mr. Vice President, if we don't act now, it's going to be too late.
But crucially, to keep the temperature rise within 2 degrees, this point of stabilization needs to be at around 2015.
We've seen researchers go, holy shit, we really got to pay attention to this because this is worse than the worst case scenario.
Fire? Fire? No.
But no, we're still, our government is still doing the bidding of the oil companies and the fossil fuel companies, and we're allowing more pollution now than ever before.
We are the General Council of the United Nations of Jazz.
Noel Brown was the New York director of the United Nations Environment Program in 1989. He's quoted by the Associated Press, so this quote appeared in every major newspaper in the United States, basically. June 29th, 1989, he said, we have 10 years to solve this carbon dioxide problem, the global warming problem, as he called it, before the situation spins out of human control. That was 1989.
When I tell you the Paris Climate Agreement is the bare minimum of what could have been done. We're not even doing the bare minimum.
We have to do something. We're not looking at a hypothetical or soap drama here. We're talking about real life, and we are facing a catastrophe. I'm convinced.
Government has to start making long-term preparations now.
Jack, all you have is a theory.
You can say you don't believe in gravity, but the apple's still going to hit you on the head.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
You can say you don't believe in climate change, but it's not going to stop it getting hotter.
Many people do not really understand how big a threat climate change is to humanity. The changes that we see right now are much faster than anything we have seen in the climate history. And that concerns me because it means that ecosystems might not be able to adapt.
The real-time impacts of climate change now in agriculture, our ability to feed ourselves.
Without grains grown at scale, no civilization persists.
This year's global heat wave is so pervasive, it's surprising scientists. According to the report, this sort of record-breaking weather is linked to human-caused climate change, and we will likely see more of it.
And as long as there's a little sliver of ice left in the glass, a little sliver of ice, all the energy from the ambient air and from our hand that is influencing that ice is going to melt the ice. It takes 79.2 calories to melt a gram of ice into a milliliter of water. Once it's all water, that same 79.2 calories warms that 1 milliliter of water by 79.2 degrees Celsius. That's scalding hot.
When the Arctic ice sheet is gone, climate change will shift from gradual to rapid.
The most dangerous thing about all of this is that it actually causes methane to escape from the Arctic seafloor into the atmosphere. And because carbon dioxide emissions don't reach their greatest impact for 10 years after they're released, we've really yet to see these effects. And all of this feedback could raise the global temperature 18 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial levels, all by the year 2026. So without climate action, scientists are now warning that, quote, within just 1 decade, the combined impact of extreme weather, falls in soil and air quality, habitat loss, shortages of food, water, shelter, and all of the basic things we need to sustain life can threaten most, if not all, life on Earth with extinction. Now, at the end of 2016, temperatures at the North Pole were 8 times higher than average temperature increases across the globe.
I know. Yeah. Okay. Subject, fire. Dear Sir stroke Madam, I'm writing to inform you of a fire which has broken out at the premises of... No, that's too formal. Dear Sir stroke Madam, fire! Exclamation mark. Fire! Exclamation mark. Help me! Exclamation mark. 123 Carrendon Road. Looking forward to hearing from you. All the best, Maurice Moss.
Temperatures over the entire Arctic north of 80 degrees latitude have averaged about 10 degrees above normal since the beginning of the calendar year.
Thickness is declining 4 times faster than area. Area will remain high until thickness drops to 0 and the entire ice sheet suddenly disappears.
At the end of last year, global temperatures were well over the 2.7 degree Fahrenheit guardrail that were set by the Paris Agreement.
So half of the politicians in Washington don't even believe in climate science. That's the Republicans.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
The other half believes in climate science, but they're not doing shit about it. That's the Democrats. They just sit around. I believe the right things, but I will proceed to not fight for the right things or do anything. Well, then that's a recipe for perpetual disaster.
Fire? Fire? No?
So there's plenty of science to support the notion that an ice-free Arctic leads to a very abrupt rise in global average temperature.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
So the science is all clear and is all freely available and is linked to abundant referee journal literature.
Science is interesting.
But I could never convince people who are unconvinced by evidence.
And if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
The second phenomenon that could easily lead to the demise of humanity is a very abrupt release of methane, of which there are billions of tons found in the relatively shallow seafloor of the Arctic Ocean. Natalia Shikova and her research team have been conducting research on this topic for a decade and a half or more, and concluded at the European Geophysical Union meeting in 2008, about 10 years ago, that an abrupt release of 50 gigatons of methane was highly possible at any time. Their research was conducted on the East Siberian Arctic shelf. That would be enough to warm the planet sufficiently that we would be unable to grow grains at scale in the northern hemisphere within the same growing season.
Biblical.
Sam Carana had just come out with an analysis July 15th, I believe, pointing out that we're headed for a 10 degrees Celsius global average temperature rise, 10.02 degrees, above baseline by the middle of 2026.
Arthur Schopenhauer, perhaps my most favorite philosopher, pointed out many years ago, quote, "All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident."
If 320 parts per million was enough to melt the Arctic, how will getting back to 350 parts per million do anything, especially if the Arctic ice sheet no longer reflects sunlight during summer months? We are past the tipping point.
Production of greenhouse gases, primarily through burning fossil fuels, traps the heat onto planet Earth and has caused the warming of the planet since the 1750s of about 1.6 or 1.8 degrees Celsius above the 1750 baseline.
De Puritijnen hebben de macht genomen en toen kreeg je dus de industriële revolutie en alles ging draaien om geld verdienen en ja, toen is eigenlijk de hele boel naar de kloten gegaan, om het maar zo te zeggen.
Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, since we started burning coal and oil and other fossil fuels at large scale, we've actually managed to trap enough heat through manipulating the atmosphere to cause the temperature of the planet to rise quite significantly in a relatively short period of time. The plants on land and the plankton in the ocean can't respond very quickly to the very rapid changes that are occurring.
In fact, the current rise in temperature is happening much, much faster than it did 55 million years ago.
Carbon dioxide release into the atmosphere is occurring about 10 times faster than it did during the PETM, when the global average temperature rose at 1.5 degrees Celsius in 13 years. Climate change and abrupt climate change are two outcomes or consequences or symptoms of civilization. Civilization is a heat engine.
More than 95% of all people on Earth are breathing unhealthy air.
If you're unwilling to pursue the volumes of evidence pointing that out, then I'm not sure me giving you the elevator pitch is going to help.
More than 15,000 scientists are sounding an alarm about climate change. They call it a warning to humanity.
The Arctic and the Antarctic play the role of kind of like an air conditioner for the Earth system. They're kind of the canary in a coal mine of global warming.
Antarctica is now melting 3 times faster than ever before. That's according to a new international study. Some changes are already irreversible, but by reducing CO2 emissions, this will help towards preventing the situation worsening.
Every effort to cut greenhouse gas emissions has been stalemated.
I had written an article on the greenhouse effect. It was a year-end article. They wanted me to pick out the most important scientific event of 1988. And I really thought that the most important scientific event of 1988 would only be recognized sometime in the future when you get a little perspective.
You know what? I'm happy.
The very definition of this set of living arrangements is must go faster. That's how we treat all of our lives. All of society, all of our communities is we just must go faster. As a consequence, we're going faster towards extinction. We're going into the 6th mass extinction and proceeding faster than any mass extinction event in planetary history. Again, it's very, very sad, very disappointing, but not a big surprise. I mean, who could possibly think that we could foul our nest every single day and come out clean?
And if that were the profit curve of some firm, I think the CEO would be in a panic by now about the thing. And there's a lot of similarity between climate change and the economic system. They're both a mess of nonlinear differential equations and liable to do things like that.
99.9% of the world sees absolutely nothing wrong with our present economic system. And I am screaming at the top of my lungs, that's what's killing us.
This disturbing criticism is backed up by evidence gathered by scientists who go out there in the real world and are famous for the high quality of their measurements of CO2, of global temperatures and sea level rise.
With the advent of detailed studies, the laws of physics, accurate monitoring of the climate and levels of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, ignorance is no longer an option, and many total morons choose denial instead of facing the facts.
Even the most pessimistic of the models, the top one, is 1.6 times less than the amount of melting that's actually happened. And again, what they're predicting is much less frightening than what is really happening.
The days of the ice in the Arctic are numbered when even the heaviest ice now starts breaking up and drifting around.
This was posted just on October 17th, so just yesterday. We're heading to a very warm Arctic winter. In the next 16 days, the Arctic will face incredible temperatures, 20 to 24 degrees Celsius above average.
We're already seeing major methane releases starting to happen, methane plumes starting to come up. So I think we're at grave risk of what Natalia Shikova, another methane researcher, formerly with University of Alaska Fairbanks, has warned of a methane burp, literally a 50 gigaton release of methane all at once if one of these whole shelves goes all at once, that she says is a very distinct possibility and could already happen at any moment.
And that could bring much of life on Earth to an end?
It would add so much. It would literally do what you just warned, but in a matter of minutes. It would release an amount of carbon, CO2 equivalent into the atmosphere that would speed things up so dramatically that there's, at that point, it's survival mode. There's no mitigating it. There's no stopping it. So yeah, that literally would alter life on the entire planet in a matter of minutes, and that's a very real possibility, and that's in a peer-reviewed, scientifically published study, and has been for years now.
Sometimes you just think, what would actually change if I just killed myself? There's absolutely no point to anything.
You're right, no point. It's all futile.
Hey, people keep telling us how destructive and pointless our consumer lifestyles are, and how much damage we're doing and how it can't be sustained. But whenever I look out the window, there's burgers and beer everywhere. In fact, there have never been so many varieties of beer and burger on Earth.
Absolutely nothing has been or is being done about the things that are really killing us, and not just us, but every living thing on the planet. Just a lot of talk.
The scientist in Australia whose job it was to monitor the health of the Great Barrier Reef, having announced that the Great Barrier Reef cannot be saved, that it's done for. That's like...
We've cut down all of the old growth forest in the last 100 years. We fouled the air, we dirtied the water, and we think we're awesome. Right. And there is a link between these things as well. I recognize that you got to break some eggs to make omelets, but you don't have to cut down every damn tree so that we can have 3 homes for everybody in the 1%.
Right.
Right. And that's what we've been doing for a long time.
Now we're doing a terrible job. In fact, if we wanted to think about what we could do to make things worse than what they are, it can be difficult actually to think of.
Les politiques mises en œuvre sont globalement décevantes, y compris en France.
J'ai le cœur qui est triste.
Et Jean Jouzel continue à alerter. Tempête, sécheresse, 55 degrés en France dès 2050, montée des eaux, augmentation des inégalités, des désagréments qui pourraient précéder un autre petit problème, la disparition totale de l'humanité.
C'est pas la planète qui est en danger, c'est l'homme finalement.
Oui, je souhaite simplement que dans tous les pays du monde, les engagements qui ont été pris soient mis en œuvre, mais tout de suite, pas après 2020. Ce qui est important, c'est la période entre aujourd'hui et 2020. La condition du succès, c'est d'agir tout de suite, rapidement et de façon extrêmement volontariste dans tous les pays de la planète. Nous sommes tous concernés et effectivement, si nous voulons garder un climat agréable pour les jeunes d'aujourd'hui, il faut agir tout de suite.
Merci beaucoup, Jean Jouzel, climatologue.
What's this about? We've got 10 years to solve a problem. And this is, you show some quotes from the 80s and 90s, and then, 30 years later, people are saying, well, we've got 10 years to solve the problem.
Right.
Like
we always have 10 years to solve it.
The Paris climate talks wrapped up last week, and they're being touted by many as a huge step toward keeping the planet livable. Yet Bill McKibben said in the New York Times, it's a great plan for 1995.
Mais le passage à l'action, c'est autre chose. Les émissions, par exemple, dont il faudrait qu'elles diminuent chaque année, ont augmenté entre 2016 et 2017. C'est vrai pour la France, c'est vrai pour l'Europe, c'est vrai au niveau planétaire. Donc effectivement, nous ne sommes pas sur une bonne trajectoire. Nous sommes plutôt à contresens en termes de lutte contre le réchauffement climatique.
Not only are we not reducing CO2 emissions to the point where CO2 is stabilizing, but the CO2 level is rising beyond exponentially. It's going faster than it's ever gone before.
The amount of oxygen in the atmosphere has declined significantly since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and that's starting to make us, for lack of a better word, stupid.
With many developing countries already suffering from I won't change and high levels of denial, scientists warn there's a risk of runaway global moroning when the increasing numbers of morons on Earth overwhelm the intelligent people.
You know, we've created this mess for ourselves and we're being very stupid collectively, and we don't need to continue being very stupid.
There are two indispensable things, intelligence and goodwill. Intelligence without goodwill is apt to be inhuman, and goodwill without intelligence is impotent. The two must go together.
You try to look on the bright side.
Ha! The bright side.
There was no rain from May till early August. EU Agricultural Commission says EU needs 30% of food to come from imports. Ay, 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 ay.
I'm sure it'll be fine. People have got to stop fear-mongering. This is when we need to get concerned.
Des records de chaleur battus en France, mais aussi à l'étranger, de la Californie à Tokyo, du Sahara au cercle polaire. C'est toute la planète qui subit le changement climatique. Nous en parlons avec vous, Jean Jouzel. Vous êtes climatologue. Alors, dans votre livre, vous le dites, nous avons 3 ans pour inverser la courbe. Comment ?
Il faut agir. Et agir, c'est investir au niveau européen. C'est pour ça qu'avec
que vous proposez, un
Pierre
pacte,
Larouteau, nous proposons un pacte européen pour le climat.
Pour sauver le climat.
Oui, bien sûr.
What's the point of anything?
What is the meaning of our life, really? If we work and live destroying the planet while sacrificing the future of our children.
Break the hammerlock of the oil industry and enable humanity to save itself.
We are killing our planet. Let us face it. There is no planet B.
Oil corrupts politics. Oil buys politicians.
Hello to everyone. This is a message for American researchers, entrepreneurs, engineers working on climate change. Last Saturday, I invited you to come to France and join European and French researchers to work on climate change here, because here you are welcome. I have no doubt about climate change and how committed we have to be regarding this issue.
Des mesures qui ne sont pas forcément toutes populaires. Jean Jouzel, merci beaucoup.
France, 6 points.
Luxembourg, 12 points. 12 points.
You know what? I'm happy.
The roll of distant thunder breaks. The afternoon of silence wakes. They hurry through from gate to gate as if they know this dance. In fury blind I drive at night across the moors, the open roads, beneath the freezing starry skies, racing in some trance. These cities are illusions of some triumph for the nature's laws. We've seen the iron carcass rust and buildings topple into dust, and as the waters rise it seems we cling to all the ruthless things. The question lies, technology, while spirits scream and sing. Oh God, I love the world, I love the world, I love the world, I love the world.
my best guess would be 2022. No ice in September at the end of the melt season. In the Arctic Ocean, no sea ice. And then within a few years, the duration of no sea ice would extend to August, September, October, and within a few more years, July, August, September, October, November, and within a decade, as a guesstimate, no sea ice year-round. I mean, we're heading to that state.
You're bringing everyone down.
No, I'm not.
Yes, he is.
Hundreds of years ahead of schedule than studies that had referenced the same thing that came out just a couple of years ago. That's how fast this is speeding up.
Glaciers on mountaintops that are outside of Greenland and Antarctica, and these are rapidly melting out. And of course, these glaciers are very important for feeding the major river systems. These rivers dry up, and these rivers are crucial for feeding over 1 billion people.
It's the world! Animals, humanity, everything! Listen, if we don't start now, stand now, and say no, we're all gonna fucking die. So let's start tonight in Brussels, here and now, and shout, we will stay united!
Companies knew from 1959 on, they did their own study and knew there will be global warming and climate change happening because of fossil fuels. And on top of it, it will be risky for people's lives, that it will kill people and they will get cancer and all this. All of this stuff the oil companies knew, and they kept hiding it from the people. This is why we are now talking to law firms to go and do exactly the same thing as they've done in the tobacco industry, where we sue the oil companies for knowingly killing people all over the world.
Come with me if you want to live.
Throughout history, we've had sociopaths who rise to the fore, and that sociopathy has ensured a practice of genocide and ecocide for a very long time. And the two of you are calling from a country founded on genocide, first with indigenous people, and continuing today. And yet people look at the United States as the most successful, the premier nation in the history of humanity, a country absolutely founded and continuing on the basis of genocide.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
This ain't nothing, no! This is genocide!
To me, it's absolutely irresponsible to know that your product is killing people and not have a warning label on it like tobacco. Every gas station on it, every car should have a warning label on it. Every product that has fossil fuels should have a warning label on it.
I like this other quote too. He said, if you walk into a room and you know you're going to kill someone, it's first-degree murder. I think it's the same thing with the oil companies.
Come with me if you want to live.
The global balance of terror
pioneered by the United States and the Soviet Union, holds hostage all the citizens of the Earth. Each side persistently probes the limits of the other's tolerance. And the world impoverishes itself by spending $1 trillion a year on preparations for war, and by employing perhaps half the scientists and high technologists on the planet in military endeavors. How would we explain all this to a dispassionate extraterrestrial observer? What account would we give of our stewardship of the planet Earth? We have heard the rationales offered by the superpowers. We know who speaks for the nations, but who speaks for the human species?
Oh my God, murder, rapist.
Genocide. The atrocities committed, just grotesque. And the scars are still felt today.
Evil. Evil.
Fuck him. Yeah, fuck Columbus.
Fuck Christopher Columbus.
That's a big fuck you. He's the first terrorist in America, that's for sure.
From an extraterrestrial perspective, our global civilization is clearly on the edge of failure in the most important task it faces, preserving the lives and well-being of its citizens and the future habitability of the planet. A new consciousness is developing which sees the Earth as a single organism and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed. We are one planet. Long ago, when an early galaxy began to pour light out into the surrounding darkness, no witness could have known that billions of years later, some remote clumps of rock and metal, ice and organic molecules would fall together to make a place called Earth, or that life would arise and thinking beings evolve who would one day capture a little of that galactic light and try to puzzle out what had sent it on its way.
After you went through this course, you generally have acquired a solid knowledge and fundamental knowledge about what is changing in our world today and why we think you have to consider nature seriously and you have to change your business model and your individual behavior. Be prepared to be criticized, be prepared to find resistance, even some difficult meeting from time to time, because you are dealing with uncomfort. People will probably not feel very comfortable with this kind of message because they have built a lot of defense and barrier to make sure that they are intellectually comfortable. Don't hesitate to take the difficult path. They are less crowded.
And I thought, all right, they're talking about 40-year, 50-year, 100-year time frames. It's a much more serious problem for all of us to grapple with than I even thought about 10 years ago.
Heel veel problemen. En ook wij in Europa zullen een hoop problemen krijgen. Dat kan ik je wel vertellen. Lekker.
We're in this bubble of, I would say, TV and gadgets. We don't actually realize that the three most important things, clean air, clean water and food, all are reliant on our environment.
We have to speak clearly, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. You only speak of green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. But I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money.
$100 billion
Our biosphere is being sacrificed. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you're stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done, rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope. We cannot solve a crisis without treating it as a crisis. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. You have ignored us in the past, and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses, and we are running out of time.
Right. Right.
Why don't you go in the money trading? We have license available and we can make a deal, and we did this through offshores, like nothing on your name, and it could be a nice career for you. There was one condition, a warning ahead. You have to put your conscience in the freezer in minus 100 degrees. And I say, no problem. Hey, I'm nearly dead, so no problem. So I became, step by step, a servant of the big money, step by step. It was still taking some years to come in the higher regions. And I get more and more excitements, like from Russia, Secret Service. They printed better dollars, American dollars, than the American dollars who were circulating from the Federal Reserve. Better quality. And they were printed, made in the USSR. And we get the assignment, we get our commissions, and we get the assignment to dump this in the market through bigger drug dealers, people who are dealing with weapons, all kind of criminal activity. Because that was a smoothie way to get all these huge amounts of dollars in the market through the illegal channels floating around. And afterwards it was just a part of the game to have an economic war from Russia, USSR at that time, with America. And in the opposite way they did the same, but I didn't know that in that time. So as a youngster, like 24, 25, I was already messing around with economic wars worldwide. So after all these assignments, they start to spot you. Like, hey, here's a bright guy, he's always knowing his way, like hustling here, hustling there, playing with the rules. And then they start to invite you more and more for higher assignments. And then you start to work for banks, independent. You're doing the dirty work for central banks, for multinationals, for governments, for what they call now terrorist organizations, and all secret services. Hey, secret services? Yes. And then on top, like the peach or the fruit of the cake, churches. Wow, you get the whole palette where the money floats, the big money. And you get the invitation to join in these circles to move all the money they want to move worldwide. To start wars, to start all the misery in this planet. Because there is nearly no misery on this planet in a natural way. Most of them is created. Because they keep the system running, because it's a dualistic system. They make the money only because when it's dualistic. And if we have all the ships, these energy containers they use only to suck, if they are asleep, fine, you can do whatever you want. This is also the mentality of the elite. Well, they are not elite. They are not elite. The people I worked for in the end of the days, you're talking roughly about 8,500 people on this world who run the show. And they are like who I was, completely afraid, nearly dead, filling up the holes daily, never enough, surfing the monster of greed, the monster of more. This is not about humans. This is about a very evil dark force who really enjoy to destroy all life on this planet, and it's still on. And I was enjoying them as well. I really, and I don't say it with regret because I'm going back now in time, otherwise it's a fake, I really enjoyed it to have the opportunity to destroy all humans and all life on Earth. Nature was nothing. It was to be destroyed. We were hating everything what represents life. Don't take this very light. You can't imagine, I understand that, not all can understand this, but this is going on till today. Like indirectly I was killing people. Like you are in a stealth bomber, dropping bombs. I did this financial wise as missions, like destroying temporarily the economy of Italian. And then later on, when you are in the financial market, you listen to the people who are involved and they have a big laugh because some people were killing themselves because their companies were destroyed and they left behind women with children. And we have only a laugh about it. We joined it. That's the world I come out. My turning point was that I was so good in everything I did with my team that I was, in their opinion, ready for the last stage. To be invited in sacrifice of children. That hits me. That was really going through my bunker. I couldn't handle it. It was hitting me like hell. I didn't go there. And I started to malfunction. And my whole career falls apart. If we want to have liberation, don't look at outside anymore. Don't look at outside anymore. The change will be from inside. We, the people on this planet, have to choose different. Saying we don't want this anymore. It's enough. We can decide for ourselves to stand up, to be as one again, unity and diversity, and we can cooperate worldwide with each other. And tools for this are there, because one of the main tools you need to transform is the financial, monetary, banking system I was coming out. The tools are available, like healthcare, energy, everything is already available on this planet. The only thing we have to do is connect with each other, unite with each other worldwide and say no more. Stand up, be the change yourself. And we will be liberating ourselves and our planet. And I can promise you, really promise you, because I have still a lot of contacts worldwide, the most still in the prison system, the dark forces around them they are screaming because their child inside of this atomic bunker wants to go out in a safe world. And we can create this safe world for these heavily damaged children. So thank you.
Let us start with the idea of the collective behavior of cells in your body, each a single-celled microbe living its life. A long time ago, only this sort of cellular life form existed here on Earth. These little guys were not too smart, but they did choose what direction to swim and could chase nutrients, reproduce, and run from dangerous things. They made choices with their very simple systems of environmental awareness and desire to survive. Then they self-organized into colonies that were smarter as a group and had more environmental awareness than the individuals. Eventually, animals such as humans emerged. Sophisticated forms of awareness and consciousness now float on an ocean of 37 trillion living cells, self-organized as a human being. It is specifically the laws of physics that caused electrons and quarks to self-organize into 81 stable atoms, and from there, into human consciousness. And physics places no upper limit on the amount of energy and matter that can self-organize into conscious systems.
To make a mountain of your life is just a choice, but I never learned enough to listen to the voice that told me always love. Hate will get you every time, always love. Don't wait till the finish line. Slow demands come round, squeeze the air and keep the rest out. It helps to write it down, even when you then cross it out. But always love. Hate will get you every time. Always love, even when you wanna fight.
Dear friends, we are in trouble. We are in deep trouble with climate change. Climate change is running faster than we are. This is already a matter of life or death. It is hard to overstate the urgency of our situation. We are still not doing enough, nor moving fast enough to prevent irreversible and catastrophic climate disruption.
No further questions.
We see climate change running faster than expected. We see the rise of the temperature of the water faster than expected. We see the melting in the Arctic and the Antarctic faster than expected. We see glaciers receding faster than expected. We see corals bleaching faster than expected. So the realities are worse than expected, but the political will to fight climate change has relatively faded after Paris.
No further questions! No further questions! No further questions!
To waste this opportunity in Katowice would compromise our last best chance to stop runaway climate change. It would not only be immoral, it would be suicidal.
Attention, attention!
In fact, Congress has already moved to ban funding for the most mild environmental efforts. And furthermore, unfortunately, many of these people are true believers. So the head of one of the congressional subcommittees, New Republican, explained that global warming can't be a problem because God promised Noah that there wouldn't be another flood. Others are just supported by...
But why do you care about stupid people?
Stupid people. These people have power, and they're carrying out actions. They are carrying out the actions which are defunding possible efforts to do something about these crimes. Furthermore, they're backed by major concentrations of power. The major business lobbies, for example, have announced that they're funding big propaganda campaigns to convince people that this doesn't matter. These are serious issues. Incidentally, if we want to look at stupid people, we find them all over the place. For example, we happen to be right in the middle of a huge financial crisis. People have noticed. And you trace that back. A lot of it comes from a fanatic religious belief in what's called the efficient market hypothesis. It's pure fanaticism. Dominated the economics profession, dominated the Federal Reserve. One consequence was that when an $8 trillion housing bubble developed, totally unrelated to any fundamentals, completely off the 100-year history of housing prices, the profession and the Fed, the central bank, said it's not necessary to pay attention because of efficient markets. I mean, is that very different from God promised Noah?
No further questions!
That's great.
I believe that climate change denial is a form of mental illness.
All over Mother Earth, those that are standing up for Mother Earth, indigenous people, are being murdered.
We're really asleep all across the world.
Miracles will happen as we speak. But we're never gonna survive unless we get
face the fact that your body is fleeting and could dissolve at any moment, there is some degree of disidentification, however slight, from your own physical and psychological form, the me. When you see and accept the impermanent nature of all life forms, a strange sense of peace comes upon you. Through facing death, your consciousness is free to some extent from identification with form.